I hope everyone found it useful. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed sharing my experiences, recent examples of role plays that I've been using uh, uh, online, and yeah, and it was also enjoyable to sort of be quite candid about the sense of self-doubt that I think all teachers have, especially given what we've all been through with having that transition to teaching full-time online, and having to become very, very flexible. So yeah, so I enjoyed that aspect of it as well. So kind of being quite candid and having those soul-searching moments, and coming back to what coming back to the idea, what from your teaching practice really get your mojo from, and when you teach students. Obviously, it's not obviously have interactive activities like role plays all the time. You do have to, bring it back down to grammar exercises. It's a way of freshening things up. I think they're absolute gold dust in terms of inviting students to show aspects of their personalities, which they may not always have the opportunity to do so, do so in class. So,
Chris,
yeah,
yes,
let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say first of all that it was a really candid presentation, as you said, and it was a real pleasure to actually listen to you share your doubts and share your experiences. But I at some point at the very beginning, you mentioned initial teacher training, and you said that initial teacher training didn't quite prepare you for online teaching, right? But now, my question is, did initial teacher training really prepare you for role play as a teaching technique? Because you see, online teaching is one thing, but then face-to-face teaching is another thing. And role play in itself is a totally different thing. Okay, so I mean, it's a powerful teaching technique, but I mean, I've been teaching for over 30 years, and I have watched hundreds of teachers teach, and I've seen many role plays that even though they were supposed to be successful, they were effectively, a massive flop, because a role play, as powerful as it is not an easy teaching technique. And there is this common misconception that role play is just, oh, you get your students to perform and it's a lot of fun, and you just do something different. But as a matter of fact, I find it one of the most difficult teaching techniques. A role play is an extremely hard thing to execute successfully, right? Because it's a matter of the teacher sitting back in the corner and watching students go wild, right? So my question is, did the initial teacher training actually prepare you for 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 role play activities? How do you feel about this? Quite apart from online teaching that you have already mentioned, but I'm talking about the actual technique itself.
I think I got back to my CELTA. Did a while ago now. My favourite part of the class, it was always that production element of it right at the end, where you bring it all together. So with the CELTA, I think it's standard as part of CELTA training. So much is attached to teaching PPP, and you have so much sort of hanging on that last 15-20 minute section of the class. So yeah, I think you're right. I think in terms of being prepared, being taught how to teach in that way, using that, using a role play technique, I think it came a lot from my own sort of education background. I did drama for A level, and I always loved high risk motivational teaching strategies that kind of make students feel a little bit on the edge of their seat in terms of being brought out of their comfort zone. So I think even though the original sort of CELTA, teaching, it is focused on introducing, the pedagogical structure, PPP. I think all of my. If I look back to my teacher training, my first teacher training experience, they were always my favourite parts of the class. That final 15-20 minute section. I think it was more so about. If I look back on my teacher training, it was how to get to that point. It was more of a focus on that as opposed to, uh, delivering, setting up
The reason
a
why
role-playing activity.
the reason why I'm asking this question is because, of course, I mean, there are some teachers like yourself who, I mean, you just feel like you have this position, right? So, like, a role play activity is something you feel because
Yeah,
that's your personality. But there are many teachers who are different, right?
yeah,
So, and obviously, a role play is a powerful teaching technique. It really is for many reasons, and quite a few of them you actually mentioned in the video. So the reason why I'm mentioning this initial teacher training is because many newly qualified teachers don't quite know where to start. So they get their first job, and there is the course book, and they follow the course book, and they would like to do something different, but they just don't know where to start. And obviously, you and I, we both know that it's not easy to run a successful role play activity. So I wonder if you could help newly qualified teachers by, I don't know, being a little bit more specific about the balance between, I mean, how much time do you actually have to put into preparation of the task and then setting up the task, and how long the actual task is going to be? So what's the balance? I mean, is it 10 minutes of preparation and then 1 hour of students performing, or is it 1 hour of prep and 10 minutes of performing? What's the balance when it comes to a successful role play activity? What would you say to newly qualified teachers?
I think to newly qualified teachers, I guess what I wish I'd known when I first started teaching, it was, I think it is a question of, so the way you structure a role play is very, very important. I think if I look back when I first started delivering drama-based activities at summer schools, for example, I think with a role play activity, you always more often than not, you have more confident students who need little or way of prompting, to do a drama-based activity. But to make it inclusive, to get everyone involved, then it is very much it is a more delicate thing.
It is, isn't it? Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
And it's really time consuming in the sense that, I mean, that's my experience. To kind of run a 15-minute role play activity, I spend typically half an hour trying to set it up and to get it off the ground.
Yeah.
So you see, this prep time, this time that you dedicate to setting up the task, is very often much longer than the actual activity.
Definitely, yeah.
And this is something that many teachers can't see. They think that it's enough to just give instructions and roll cards and just say, off you go, and students will be enjoying the task. It's not the case, right? I mean, what's your experience?
I think if I think of my favourite role play lessons over the years, I've had enough time to emotionally engage in the subject matter beforehand. I've had enough time prior to roleplay activity, even for a whole lesson, thinking about how do I feel about this? What is my experience of this? Or if they have no experience of it, then you have to provide them with that input from the beginning. You can get lucky, you can strike gold, and students, you'll find something that hits a nerve, or that they feel immediately enthralled by, engaged by, especially with younger learners. As we all know, younger learners have a wonderful sense of morality, what is right, what is wrong, and if you invite them into subject matter that's where something is being wrong or something's immoral, then students, even your shyer students, they're often sort of really sort of animated by this sense of no, this is right, this is how. So
yes. But you have to scaffold it a lot.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I feel that this is one of the most or the biggest misunderstandings in EFL. And it's not just a case of, we are not just talking about newly qualified teachers, we're talking about experienced teachers. Yeah, it's a big misconception that it takes 10 minutes to run a successful role play activity. It doesn't. The setup requires much more scaffolding, much more input from the teacher.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think my experiences on my PGCE year, I watched a history lesson where students had to perform the role of the Elizabeth I Privy Council of the Spanish Armada, I think it was, and that took 2 or 3 lessons to immerse students, to give them that sense of autonomy or ownership over the subject matter. It did require time, and of course, the majority of language teachers work in very tight schedules, syllabus bound courses, where you don't always have that liberty, you don't always have that luxury of providing students with that amount of time. But homework, this is where homework comes in as well.
And you did say that in the presentation, actually, you did say that, you have to take it one step at a time. You kind of, you get students ready for this big task. So you have to take it one step at a time, and you kind of grade it. You take them there. Or as you have put it, you have them under a spell, or as I would say, you sell it to them. So
absolutely.
Now, Chris, I think there is a beautiful question in the Q&A from
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Q&A. Sorry, yeah. Let me click on it. I'm looking at the chat as well. So praising the student is very important part during the learning process. Do you think that in some cultures it can be misunderstood? Oh, fabulous question. Yeah, I think there can be some very sort of traditional, almost too traditional notions of what a teaching role is. So I guess I think it can be, can't it? It can be sort of misinterpreted.
I wonder if Maria, did you want to, can you Hedy, could you help us and bring Maria in so she can you can unmute her.
Yes.
Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah, okay. Because I love your question about praising students and the different cultures.
It's interesting. I mean, thank you very much, Chris. I'm really enjoying your presentation. I do like it. I just anyway. I just formulated that question because in one of the several summer courses, I came across to some students. Um, some of them they were from Spain, and I'll have to say that happened to me with the Spanish students, that they couldn't understand the praising. I mean, they would say something or we would be doing an activity, and I would just congratulate and say, "That's fantastic, really great. Oh, that's a great idea." And they would look at me kind of surprised. Why would I praise them? And they, I said, "But don't you get praise at home? Don't you get praise in the mainstream school?" And they said, "Well, not really, no." And I thought, how boring. But then, I taught in Spain in the mainstream school, and the same thing happened. I mean, they were lovely students, but they couldn't understand why I was praising them. And then, of course, some of them said, "Well, because the other teachers, they would never say we do it well. They're always telling us that we have to do better and that that's not right." And I said, "Well, but you're doing it okay. You're doing it very well, and I think you deserve the praise." But it wasn't exaggerated. It was saying, like, for example, they would just, if it was a role play or an activity they were doing within a team, then I would congratulate the entire team, and then I would ask for the rest of the class to applaud, to clap, and I thought that was great and good for their morale. But I think it took them a while to understand my praise, and it was genuine. It wasn't just like, slimy sort of praise. It was genuine. But anyway, that's something that perhaps, in that particular context, and I don't know whether other cultures, but that was very, very peculiar. And then I always remember that. But perhaps it was just that occasion. It was just that occasion.
I wonder if it's not just the personality thing, Maria, because maybe some students feel like they may be feeling that they are being put on the spot. Maybe I don't think it's a cultural thing. I don't know. How do you feel about
I
this?
wouldn't like to think that is a cultural thing, but I was wondering whether, because the ones I just got in England, they all came from the same school, more or less. And I was wondering whether that school, they didn't encourage role playing, or it was, it was a very formal school, and everything was guided to learning the grammar, memorizing. And I don't think they did pay much attention to this kind of role play activity, because sometimes in mainstream schools they have 25 students in a class, and perhaps there is no time for activities like that. Perhaps I'm just.
Yeah, I can see Emily is also saying in the chat box that she doesn't think it's cultural. I don't think it's cultural. I think it maybe it was just a coincidence, Maria, or maybe
Yeah.
it was just a bad day. Like it's hard to say. Or
Yeah, or the group itself.
yeah,
But it was not just in the UK. As I say, I taught in the mainstream school in Spain, and I came across the students. Then towards the end, I mean, those students were very happy about the praise, and they really and things changed. But again, probably the other teachers were more strict or more serious, or perhaps um, I just wanted to add something to what Chris said. You did drama at school, and I just wanted to point out that I also did drama, and I just use a lot of my activities. Role playing were based on drama activities. and it worked beautifully. And I thought, wow, I was so happy when you said that, because wow, it really just opened my ears and my mind to the fact that the drama activities, activities, spoken activities based on drama activities worked very well with my students.
Maria, can I ask you a question? Since
Yes.
you already, yeah, this is because I know you have a lot of experience, so you've been through quite a few role play activities. What's your experience in terms of setting up a role play activity? I mean, how do you, because you see, I keep going on and on and on about the difficulty that is involved in setting up a task so it actually takes off and students enjoy it, is based on my own experience. I know the kind of teacher I used to be when I started teaching, and I know how, say, I was different 10 years later. And I could see how role play activities, if not set up properly, were just a waste of time, because I would spend hours and hours trying to prepare a nice lesson, and then the actual task was 10 minutes. Students had nothing more to say. So you kind of go into the classroom ready and happy, and you have this beautiful lesson, and then suddenly you don't understand what is going on, because students just don't want to communicate, and a task that was supposed to be half an hour is only 7 minutes. So this is when I understood that the key to a successful activity, a role play activity, is actually the setup stage. So I wonder how you feel about it. What's your experience?
Well, I mean, primarily, of course, I wouldn't set up a role play activity with my students until I have had time to assess them, kind of how they interact in the class with the other students. Also, it is very, very important also to know if you have a mixed nationality group of students, the cultural background, which is very, very important as well. I mean, fortunately, with our students, we always have, they write a paragraph about themselves, likes, dislikes, where they come from geographically, their hobbies. And then you can more or less just kind of assess, the level. Of course, you have the same level in the same class. And then, of course, you spend the first 3 days just checking, testing, and then of course finding out what they like, what they don't like, how they interact, and then just try to find something that doesn't necessarily have to be common ground, but that the other students can be easily thrown in, and make everybody participate. And then when you do kind of like a small groups, a task-based activity, so you just make sure that you mix them with what you think the right person. Sometimes you get students that they are shy, they don't work so much, but then sometimes when you get the encouragement of the other students or the enthusiasm, it's catchy, and then they just they participate, they talk. And I mean, of course, I mean, you've got to know, of course, what do you want to do with your students. But I think it's very, very important to be very flexible, and it's not necessary to have a plan B, but sometimes it's just kind of foresee what other paths could things take. And of course, since you happen to be the leader, in a way you're leading, but you're just trying not to show off that you are the leader. I mean, encourage your students to be the ones that take the lead in a way, and let them, give them enough rope,
Yeah.
and don't kind plan anything too limited. When I say limited, things that fit perfectly in a box, because there may be lessons that you plan always think that they are perfect, and they think, oh, this is a beautiful lesson, and then when you bring it to the class, as you say, 10 minutes and boo, everything fizzles out and you get very disappointed. So just don't think about perfection, because we are not perfect.
Yes.
And as students are as students, and if we are aiming for spontaneity and freedom, then I think it's important that we just let the air come in and let the students breathe at their own ease.
Yes, yes. Oh, beautiful, Maria. This is really, really helpful and really interesting. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks to you for allowing me so much talk.
Thank you, thank you. It was really interesting, really interesting. Thanks.
Thanks.
Um,
In
so
relation to the point on praise earlier, I think there is a danger of praise feeling a bit tokenistic, a bit meaningless, especially if you overpraise. You want praise to be powerful, and with praise, it's like any other form of classroom communication, um, which is often undermined or dismissed as just being positive words. Whereas, in terms of it as a form of classroom dialogue, praise has to be specific. Students need to know exactly what they've done well. So, once you enable praise to become specific, and then you're allowing it as a classroom experience to be shared, and for students to also potentially take that away as well. So you're making students into auxiliary teachers themselves, as opposed to just throwing blanket praise everywhere. And it's an easy trick. It's an easy thing to. It's an easy thing to. It's almost like a teacher's tick at times, isn't it? Where you go, good, well done, nice, and we've all been there, haven't we? The moment you make praise specific.
Yeah, at some point, yes. I mean, the number of times we say well done, well done, well done, it's almost like punctuation, right? So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's not effective. Now, Chris, I have to say one more thing, because there's something that you mentioned in the slides during the presentation. You mentioned as one of the task types, you mentioned using opposites. And when you said this, it made me very, very happy, because you see, again, perhaps it's just my personality, but I like to, my preferred mode of teaching is teaching by using opposites rather than similarities. Okay, so that's how I am. So I really love to create this kind of sense of conflict in the classroom, because I feel that once you create this sense of conflict, you generate ideas. So this is also, I think, my preferred type of a role play activity. So where you have people, you assign contrasting views to students, create this, well, you can safely say a sense of conflict, really, which is moderated and monitored very, very carefully.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, this would be my preferred task. I think that's how that's how I like to teach. So I really loved this example in your presentation, using opposites.
Thank you. So there's a lot of energy that you can draw out of this idea of opposition, and if I think of my next role play lesson or drama-based class I'm going to do, I've lost count of the amount of times I've had fellow teachers in Italy, my neighbour, my landlord, have very sort of strong views about England not accepting their runners-up medals in the football the other day. And that is an idea of conflict, of contrast. Why is it that, why is it a part of sportsmanship? Should you keep your runners-up medal? Or is there a case for, expecting people to behave differently, that they shouldn't be happy with being second best? Is it unrealistic to expect people to behave that way? So it's that's so the idea of opposites, so opposite forms of opinion. But yeah, no, that's something which I've had in my mind this week actually.
Yeah, so I really like that. And I sorry, I have one more question, and this is I think this is quite important, quite an important question. It's to do with online teaching, because I mean, here we are, okay, removed from the classroom, okay, teaching online most of the time. Now, obviously, role play is powerful in the face-to-face classroom, but then in online teaching, it's an emerging thing, right? I mean, how can you? So I wonder, because you teach online, so I wonder how this, how a role play activity is different online. I mean, what would be the biggest difficulty for teachers when setting up a role play task? And can we actually use the same role play activities as we would typically use in the classroom, or do we have to tweak them somehow? I mean, how does it, what's your experience?
I think it's perfectly feasible to deliver role play activity online as you would do in a normal classroom. The main thing you're taking away is the physicality, people being in close proximity. So that element is gone. However, with teaching online, for example, if we were responding to an emergency, if we weren't, teachers talking about teaching, but let's imagine we were in a television studio, then in that context, doing a role play online suddenly makes a lot more sense, because you could have one person presenting data, talking about data, another person referring to an interview, or another person interviewing someone else. I recently did a blended learning online classroom where I had a strange scenario of 5 students sat together around a laptop in a classroom, and then all the other students from home. So you could have the 5 students being interviewed, and then assign the other students international correspondent in. So you can suddenly assign different roles and utilize students' abilities to use visuals a lot more. So with something like that, you couldn't just spring that out. I think doing a more elaborate role play online, you do need to have students prepare things in advance before. So that's that's really sort of layered, structured thing. With the use of sharing your screen, that's a whole new ball game in terms of what you can do with a role play.
Do you feel that there are limitations online when it comes to role play? Like, do you actually feel it when you are there in front of your computer and you have this beautiful role play activity ready for your students? And do you feel that you are limited by the fact that it's not a face-to-face classroom?
If anything, I've noticed that some students, quite interesting, maybe it varies from my experience, I've noticed that some students online, in the comfort of their own bedrooms, dining rooms, whatever, feel a bit more sort of less inhibited than being asked to stand up in class. So I've had shyer, more reluctant students, flourish a bit more in the comforts of home, as opposed to, booking the hall, the school, and having the stage, there waiting for them. So it has worked both ways. And Yeah, it is a little bit easier to delegate and to sort of referee online, with the mute, button and so on and whatnot. Sometimes it can be trickier with classroom management, in a real classroom, because it is a high risk teaching strategy, isn't it? It does,
Yes. Chris, I'm getting messages that we have to slowly wrap up. But I want to ask you one last question. Chris, one last question before
Sure.
you go. Have you ever been in a situation, or have you ever kind of planned, designed, and delivered a lesson or a role play activity that was a complete disaster, like a complete flop, like something that you just don't even want to look back and remember this lesson? Have you had this experience? There's a reason why I'm asking. So
Yeah, I think oh gosh.
And if yes, then why do you think, with hindsight, like why do you think the lesson didn't work? So it's because I want teachers.
Yeah, sure.
As well. So
I delivered a business English lesson on brainstorming, and they had to agree on who would be the next James Bond. Yeah. None of them liked James Bond. It just so happened to be not reacting to their interests, but pretty much just following the textbook, because that was the case study in the book.
But that ties in very, very nicely with what Maria said, right? She said, before I run a role play activity, I always do my homework, and I make sure that I understand my students. I know what they like. I know what they don't like. So I kind of come prepared. So would you say that was your mistake?
In that case, absolutely. Yeah. Delivering a James Bond themed lesson to students who do not like James Bond. Yeah, pulling teeth a little bit, but
Thank you very much for this, Chris.
Sure.